When Sarah Johnson heard the faint knocking at her front door at 2:17 a.m. on a freezing January night, she never expected to find the Sanders twins standing on her porch with their baby brother wrapped in a thin blanket, their small faces streaked with tears and determination. What those children whispered through chattering teeth would uncover a darkness no one in Riverdale had suspected and change the course of their lives forever. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. The sound jolted Sarah Johnson from her light sleep, a gentle but persistent tapping at her front door. Living alone at 56 after her husband's passing 2 years ago, unexpected sounds in the night sent her heart racing. She glanced at the bedside clock, 2:17 a.m. Who could possibly be at her door at this hour? As a retired nurse with 30 years of emergency room experience, Sarah approached potential crises with practiced calm. She slipped on her robe and shuffled to the front door, peering through the peephole with cautious curiosity. What she saw made her immediately unlock the door, security concerns forgotten. Emma and Lily Sanders, the 7-year-old twins from across the street, stood huddled together on her porch. Between them, they supported their baby brother Noah, awkwardly wrapped in what appeared to be a thin receiving blanket. All 3 children wore pajamas wholly inadequate for the 20-degree night. A dusting of snow covered the twins' slippers and had settled in their blonde hair. "Mrs. Johnson," Emma whispered, her voice shaking from cold or fear or both. "We need help. Noah won't stop crying at home, and Mark says babies who cry get put in the basement." Lily, the quieter twin, clutched her brother tighter and added, "We didn't know where else to go. Mom won't wake up." Sarah ushered the children inside, maternal instincts and professional assessment happening simultaneously. The baby's lips showed concerning hints of blue. The twins' fingers were red and stiff from cold. All 3 needed warmth immediately. "You did the right thing coming here," Sarah assured them, guiding them to her living room, where she quickly wrapped them in the thick Afghan from her couch. She took the baby from them, noting his weak cry, a concerning sign in an 18-month-old, and the unusual bruise pattern on his tiny arms. While settling the children with warm blankets and preparing hot chocolate to raise their core temperatures, Sarah asked gentle, open-ended questions. The story that emerged in fragmented pieces from the twins made her blood run cold despite the warmth of her home. "Mark doesn't like noise at night," Emma explained, her small hands curled around the mug of hot chocolate. "He says Noah cries too much, and Mom just takes her special medicine and sleeps." "He put Noah in the cold garage last night," Lily added, her voice dropping to a whisper. "We found him there this morning. Mom said it never happened." Sarah had known Jennifer Sanders casually for the 3 years she'd lived across the street, watching her struggle as a single mother of twins. When Mark Reynolds had moved in 6 months ago, Sarah had initially felt relief that Jennifer had found someone to help shoulder her burdens. Now, a sickening realization dawned that the charming man who waved to neighbors and improved the property's landscaping harbored a much darker presence within those walls. As a mandated reporter throughout her nursing career, Sarah knew her legal and moral obligations. What she didn't know was how to handle the immediate situation without putting the children at greater risk. She needed to call the police, but she also recognized the delicate balance required. These children had trusted her enough to seek her help. She couldn't betray that trust with actions that might frighten them further. "You're safe here," she assured them, checking Noah's temperature and color, relieved to see improvement as he warmed up. "I'm going to help make sure you stay safe, but I need to make a phone call. Would you like to watch some cartoons while I do that?" The twins nodded, the simple childhood pleasure of late-night television momentarily overriding their anxiety. Sarah stepped into her kitchen, phone in hand, and dialed 911. "I need to report 3 children in potential danger," she began, keeping her voice low. They fled to my home in the middle of the night. The baby shows signs of exposure and possible physical abuse." 20 minutes later, Officer David Chen arrived, having approached without sirens to avoid alerting the Sanders household across the street. His gentle demeanor with the children helped ease their initial fear of his uniform. "You both were very brave to take care of your little brother," Officer Chen told the twins as he knelt to their level. "Can you tell me a little more about what's been happening at home?" With Sarah sitting between them, providing reassuring touches, the twins began to share more coherent details. Mark had moved in with their mother 6 months ago, and things had been okay at first. He brought them presents and took them for ice cream, but his behavior had changed drastically in recent weeks. "He gets angry when Noah cries," Emma explained. "He says babies should be quiet and not bother grown-ups." "Mom started taking pills that make her sleep really hard," Lily added. "She doesn't hear when Noah cries anymore." "Or when we cry," Emma whispered. Officer Chen maintained his calm expression, but Sarah noticed the tightening around his eyes, the look of a professional containing their emotional response to focus on helping. The most alarming disclosure came when Emma rolled up her pajama sleeve to show a fading bruise on her upper arm. "Mark said I was being too loud during his important phone call. He squeezed really hard and said next time it would be worse." While Officer Chen documented the children's statements, Sarah attended to baby Noah, whose diaper revealed severe rash and signs of prolonged neglect. His thin frame and lethargy suggested more than just tonight's ordeal. By 3:30 a.m., a female officer had arrived with a social worker from Emergency Child Services. An ambulance waited discreetly down the street to transport the children to Riverdale Memorial Hospital for medical evaluation. "Will we have to go back home?" Lily asked, panic rising in her voice as she realized more people were becoming involved. Sarah looked to the social worker, Olivia Martinez, who approached the situation with practiced compassion. "Not tonight. Sweetheart, tonight you'll stay in a special part of the hospital where doctors can make sure you're all okay. I'll stay with you the whole time." "Can Mrs. Johnson come too?" Emma asked, clutching Sarah's hand. The request touched Sarah deeply. These children, who had shown extraordinary courage and judgment by seeking help, were now facing the frightening unknown of the child welfare system. The social worker hesitated, protocols warring with the obvious comfort the children found in Sarah's presence. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story. "I'd be happy to meet you at the hospital," Sarah offered, looking to Ms. Martinez for approval. "That would be helpful," the social worker agreed, recognizing that maintaining any sense of security for the children was paramount. As they prepared to leave, Officer Chen pulled Sarah aside. "We'll need to approach the parents' house with caution. If what the children say is accurate, we're dealing with potential child endangerment, neglect, and abuse. The mother's condition is also concerning. Possible substance abuse, either voluntary or coerced." Sarah nodded, thinking of Jennifer Sanders, once an engaged mother who had grown increasingly isolated and changeable in recent months. The transformation happened after Mark moved in. "Jennifer used to be at every school function, but I haven't seen her at the bus stop in weeks. He's always the one there, charming and explaining her absences." "Classic isolation tactic," Officer Chen noted grimly. "We see it in domestic situations frequently. Control the mother, control the children." While the officers coordinated their approach to the Sanders home, Sarah gathered a few comfort items for the children: a soft throw blanket, a children's book, and a small teddy bear she kept for when her grandchildren visited. At the hospital, the grim reality of the children's situation became clearer. The medical examination revealed that baby Noah suffered from moderate malnutrition, dehydration, and had a previously untreated ear infection that likely caused the crying that had so angered Mark. Emma had 3 distinct bruises at different stages of healing, suggesting a pattern rather than isolated incidents. Lily showed no physical marks, but exhibited signs of acute anxiety, flinching at sudden movements and speaking primarily through her sister. Sarah remained with them through the night, reading stories and providing the continuity they desperately needed. By morning, the situation across the street had exploded into a community shock. Jennifer Sanders had been found unconscious from what appeared to be a prescription drug overdose, sleeping pills mixed with alcohol. Mark Reynolds had initially attempted to charm the responding officers, presenting himself as a concerned partner struggling with Jennifer's mental health issues and claiming the children must have wandered off during one of her episodes. His composure had cracked when confronted with the children's specific allegations and the physical evidence. A search of the home revealed the cold garage with a makeshift playpen where the twins claimed Noah had been placed as punishment, and a basement room with a lock on the outside, both corroborating the children's accounts. By the time Rebecca Collins, the twins' 3rd-grade teacher at Riverdale Elementary, heard about the night's events, the community response was already mobilizing. She sat in Principal Wilson's office, tears streaming down her face as she pored over her classroom observation notes from the past month. "I noticed changes," she said, anguish evident in her voice. Emma stopped raising her hand in class. Lily barely spoke at all. They started wearing long sleeves even during gym time when the room was warm. I asked them if everything was okay at home, and they just said they were tired because the baby cried a lot. Dr. Wilson passed her a tissue. "You documented your concerns and followed up with them, Rebecca. You did what the protocols suggest. But I didn't do enough," she insisted. "I should have pushed harder, noticed more. Last week, Emma fell asleep during math. When I gently woke her, she jerked away so violently she fell out of her chair. I wrote it down, but attributed it to being startled from deep sleep." "Hindsight gives us clarity we don't have in the moment," Dr. Wilson said, though his own expression reflected the burden of missed signals. "What matters now is supporting them moving forward." Rebecca straightened her shoulders. "I want to visit them. I want them to know their school community cares, that they have consistency and support beyond what happened at home." While the school mobilized its crisis response team, the legal and child welfare systems began their complex dance. Jennifer Sanders, now hospitalized herself, faced potential charges of child endangerment and neglect, though her own status as a possible domestic violence victim complicated the prosecutor's approach. Mark Reynolds was held without bail, his previous charm replaced by hostility and accusations against Jennifer and the nosy neighbor who overreacted to normal discipline. Through it all, Sarah Johnson remained a steady presence for the children. When their maternal grandmother arrived from Pennsylvania 2 days later, Sarah helped ease the transition, explaining medical needs and the small comfort routines she'd established during the hospital stay. "They trust you," Barbara Collins, the children's grandmother, observed as they watched the twins introduce her to the hospital playroom. In the midst of losing faith in the adults who should have protected them most, they somehow found the courage to seek help and the wisdom to choose you. "They're extraordinary children," Sarah replied, watching how even now the twins maintained their protective stance around Noah, including him in their play despite the differences in age. "They saved themselves and their brother through their own courage. I just answered the door." Barbara shook her head. "Never underestimate the power of simply answering when children knock. Many wouldn't have opened their door at that hour, or would have called authorities without providing that critical safe harbor first." 2 weeks later, with the children settled temporarily in their grandmother's care and the legal proceedings against Mark Reynolds advancing, Sarah received An unexpected visit. Rebecca Collins, the twins' teacher, stood on her porch one afternoon, holding a large envelope. "The girls made something for you in art therapy," she explained. "They asked if I would deliver it personally." Inside was a crayon drawing showing 5 figures in front of 2 houses. 3 small figures, clearly the children, stood with 2 taller women illustrated with bright colors and big smiles, labeled Mrs. Johnson and Ms. Collins. Behind them were 2 houses, one dark with scribbled windows, the other bright yellow with flowers around it. At the bottom, in the careful handwriting of 7-year-olds, they had written, "Thank you for letting us in." 4 simple words that encompassed so much. Not just the physical act of opening her door that night, but the deeper act of creating space for their truth to be heard and believed. 6 months later, the landscape of all their lives had shifted dramatically. Jennifer Sanders, after intensive rehabilitation and therapy, was working to regain custody of her children under strict supervision. Mark Reynolds had accepted a plea deal facing significant prison time when evidence of previous similar behavior in another state had been discovered. The children continued to thrive in their grandmother's care, with Noah reaching appropriate developmental milestones and the twins returning to their formerly outgoing personalities at school. They still visited Sarah regularly, their resilience, a continual source of amazement to all the adults supporting their recovery. During one such visit, as they enjoyed cookies in Sarah's kitchen, Emma looked up thoughtfully. "Mrs. Johnson, how did you know what to do when we knocked on your door that night?" Sarah considered the question carefully. "I think sometimes our hearts recognize when something important is happening, even if our heads are confused. My heart knew you were brave children who needed someone to listen." Lily, who had regained much of her voice in recent months, nodded. "Seriously, our teacher says we were brave, but we were really scared." "That's exactly what courage is," Sarah told her. "Doing something even when you're afraid because you know it's important." Later, after the children had gone home, Sarah stood at her front window, looking across at the Sanders' former house, now occupied by a young couple expecting their first child. The night the twins had appeared on her doorstep had changed countless lives, including her own. She had since formalized her role as a court-appointed special advocate for children in the system, using her medical background and newfound purpose to ensure other vulnerable children had someone firmly in their corner. The case had also sparked community action. Riverdale Elementary had implemented enhanced training for teachers on recognizing signs of abuse and neglect. The hospital had improved its screening protocols for pediatric patients. The police department had established better coordination with social services for after-hours emergencies involving children. Systems had been strengthened because 2 7-year-old girls had found the extraordinary courage to bundle up their baby brother and venture into the cold night, trusting that someone would answer their knock. Sarah's phone chimed with a text message from Barbara Collins. "Emma lost her first tooth today. She's asking if you'll come to dinner tomorrow to see the gap. Says the tooth fairy might bring something special for her brave smile." Sarah smiled as she typed her reply. Some knocks on the door changed everything, not just for those seeking help, but for those who answered as well. In opening her door to 3 desperate children that January night, Sarah had also opened herself to a new chapter of purpose and connection she never could have anticipated. As she set a reminder for tomorrow's dinner celebration, Sarah reflected on a truth that had become her guiding principle. Sometimes the most important moments in life arrive unannounced, in the middle of ordinary nights, in the form of a barely audible knock. The only choice that matters is whether we find the courage to answer. The morning after the twins arrived at Sarah Johnson's door brought a flurry of activity to the normally quiet neighborhood. Yellow police tape, cordoned off the Sanders' modest rental home, and unmarked vehicles lined the street as investigators documented everything from the temperature of the garage where Noah had allegedly been left to the prescription bottles scattered across Jennifer Sanders' nightstand. Sarah sat in the hospital cafeteria, nursing her third cup of coffee. She hadn't slept since the children's arrival at her door, refusing to leave until she knew they were settled. The twins had finally drifted into exhausted slumber in adjacent beds on the pediatric floor, their hands stretched across the gap between them, fingers intertwined even in sleep. Noah had been admitted for treatment of his ear infection, dehydration, and exposure, with fluids running through a tiny IV in his arm. "Mrs. Johnson?" Sarah looked up to find Olivia Martinez, the social worker, sliding into the seat across from her. The younger woman's compassionate professionalism had been a stabilizing force through the chaotic night. "The children are still sleeping," Olivia said, correctly interpreting Sarah's questioning look. "The doctor gave them a mild sedative to help them rest. They've been through so much." Sarah nodded, relief washing over her tired features. "Have you heard anything about their mother?" "Jennifer Sanders is stable but still unconscious. Initial toxicology shows a dangerous combination of prescription sleep aids and alcohol." Olivia's voice dropped. "The officers found evidence suggesting Mark Reynolds may have been deliberately over-medicating her. There were multiple prescriptions from different doctors, all in her name, but filled at different pharmacies. He was isolating her and the children," Sarah murmured, remembering the gradual withdrawal of the once sociable family from neighborhood activities. "I should have noticed sooner. I'm a nurse. I'm trained to recognize signs of abuse." "We all missed it," Olivia acknowledged. Reynolds presented the perfect public image. Neighbors reported seeing him taking the children for ice cream, helping Jennifer with groceries, even volunteering at school events. Meanwhile, he was creating a nightmare behind closed doors. The conversation paused as Dr. Kaplan, the pediatrician who had examined the children upon admission, approached their table. Her expression was grave but controlled, the face of someone who had seen too many similar cases but never grown accustomed to them. "I've completed my comprehensive evaluation of all 3 children," she began, sitting down beside them. "The pattern is disturbing, but unfortunately familiar. Noah shows signs of chronic neglect. The diaper rash is severe enough to indicate he's been left in soiled diapers for extended periods. He's underweight for his age and has early signs of nutritional deficiencies." She referred to her notes. Emma's physical examination revealed multiple contusions at different healing stages, consistent with her account of being grabbed forcefully on different occasions. Lily shows no visible injuries, but displays significant signs of psychological trauma. Her selective mutism around adult males, including male nurses, suggests a fear response to men that's concerning. Sarah fought back tears, thinking of the bright, chatty girls who had moved into the neighborhood 3 years ago. What happens to them now? Short-term and long-term. Dr. Kaplan deferred to Olivia, who outlined the immediate plan. "We've located their maternal grandmother in Pennsylvania. Barbara Collins is driving in today and should arrive by evening. She's passed initial background checks and seems appropriate for temporary kinship placement while we conduct a fuller home study." "The children mentioned her several times," Sarah offered. "They said Mark wouldn't let her visit anymore after she asked too many questions about why they seemed so tired all the time." "Another red flag we all missed," Olivia sighed. "Abusers typically work to cut off external support, especially family members who might notice changes in the children or the abused partner." "There's something else you should know," Dr. Kaplan added. "When I spoke with Emma privately, she mentioned that Mark has other houses where he goes sometimes. He apparently told the children he has business investments in neighboring states. Given the calculated nature of the abuse here, I've flagged this for the detective. They'll be checking if he has a pattern of similar behavior elsewhere. This revelation sent a chill through Sarah. The possibility that Mark Reynolds had established similar situations in other locations, perhaps with other vulnerable single mothers and their children, suggested a predatory methodology far beyond opportunistic abuse. He hadn't simply lost control with the Sanders family. He had systematically created conditions for control and isolation. As the conversation continued, Detective Samantha Wright from the Special Victims Unit joined them, bringing updates from the scene. "We've found something concerning," she said, without preamble. "Hidden cameras throughout the house, including in the children's bedroom and bathroom. The monitoring equipment was concealed in Reynolds's home office in a locked cabinet. He's been recording the children without their knowledge." The implications were sickening. Sarah's hands tightened around her coffee cup until her knuckles whitened. Was he... She couldn't finish the question. "We're still analyzing the footage," Detective Wright replied, understanding the unspoken concern. "At minimum, this constitutes invasion of privacy and illegal surveillance of minors. Our tech team is working to determine if the footage was stored locally or shared online." "The children never mentioned cameras," Olivia noted, reviewing her interview notes. "They likely had no idea," Detective Wright explained. "The equipment is sophisticated, pinhole cameras built into smoke detectors, air fresheners, even the bathroom mirror. Reynolds has a background in security systems installation, something he conveniently omitted from his local employment records, but which we discovered when running his prints through the national database." "He's done this before," Sarah concluded, the pieces falling into place. Detective Wright nodded grimly. "We've identified at least 2 previous identities he's used in Ohio and Michigan. In both locations, he was briefly investigated for allegations similar to what we're seeing here, becoming involved with single mothers, isolating them, then controlling or abusing the children. In both cases, he disappeared before charges could be filed, and the investigation stalled when the mothers refused to cooperate. Stockholm Syndrome, Dr. Kaplan suggested. The mothers became emotionally dependent on their abuser, especially if he controlled their medication. Or they were afraid, Olivia added. Women in these situations often fear losing custody of their children if they admit to allowing abuse in the home, even if they were victims themselves. As the professionals discussed next steps in the investigation, Sarah found herself thinking about the extraordinary courage it had taken for Emma and Lily to act against the climate of fear Reynolds had so carefully constructed. 2 7-year-olds had somehow maintained enough sense of right and wrong, enough love for their baby brother to risk the frightening journey across the street in the middle of a frigid night. "I'd like to be there when their grandmother arrives," Sarah said suddenly, interrupting the technical discussion of jurisdiction and evidence collection. "The twins trust me, and this transition will be another trauma, if not handled carefully." Detective Wright seemed ready to object, protocols and procedures already stretched by Sarah's continued involvement, but Olivia nodded in agreement. Having a familiar, trusted adult present would help ease the transition, the social worker acknowledged. "These children have shown remarkable judgment in seeking help from Mrs. Johnson. Maintaining that connection provides needed continuity." By late afternoon, Sarah had returned to her home long enough to shower and change clothes before heading back to the hospital. The news of the night's events had spread through the neighborhood, and her phone buzzed constantly with texts and calls from concerned neighbors. She answered only her daughter's call, briefly explaining the situation and assuring her that she was okay, just focused on helping the children through the immediate crisis. As she gathered a few items she thought might comfort the children. Soft blanket, several picture books, and a stuffed rabbit her granddaughter had left during her last visit. Sarah noticed movement across the street. A news van had pulled up near the police tape, and a reporter was preparing for a live shot, gesturing toward the Sanders house. The exploitation of these children's trauma for ratings sent a wave of protective anger through Sarah. They deserved privacy to heal, not public spectacle. She made a mental note to discuss media protection with Olivia and Detective Wright. At the hospital, Sarah found the twins awake and considerably more alert, though still subdued. They brightened visibly when she entered their room, and Lily even spoke without prompting, a small but significant step given her regression to silence during their ordeal. "Mrs. Johnson, are they going to make us talk to more people?" she asked, fidgeting with the edge of her hospital blanket. The lady with the notebook kept asking about the garage and the basement. "They're trying to understand everything that happened so they can make sure you stay safe," Sarah explained, sitting between their beds. "I know it's hard to tell the same sad things over and over, but each person has a different job to help you." Emma, who had assumed a protective role toward her sister throughout the ordeal, looked at Sarah with eyes too old for her 7 years. "Is our mom in trouble? Mark said if we ever told anyone about home things, Mom would go to jail and we'd never see her again." The manipulation was textbook, using the children's love for their mother to enforce silence. Sarah chose her words, carefully balancing honesty with reassurance. "Your mom is in the hospital too right now. She's getting special help because Mark was giving her medicine that made it hard for her to take care of you properly." She took both girls' hands in hers. "The most important thing to remember is that none of this is your fault. Not what happened to Noah, not what happened to your mom, not anything Mark did." "But if we had told someone sooner," Emma began, her voice breaking. "You told someone exactly when you were brave enough to," Sarah interrupted gently. "And that was exactly the right time." A soft knock at the door announced Olivia's arrival with news that Barbara Collins, the children's grandmother, had reached the hospital and was speaking with medical staff about Noah's condition before coming to see the twins. "She's very excited to see you both," Olivia told the girls. "She's brought some clothes and your special stuffed animals from her house, the ones you play with when you visit her." The mention of their grandmother's house brought the first genuine smiles Sarah had seen from the twins. "Does she still have the tire swing?" Lily asked, a hint of childhood excitement breaking through the trauma. "And the cookies shaped like stars?" Emma added. The questions revealed a vital piece of information. Their grandmother's home represented safety and normal childhood pleasures, a crucial foundation for their recovery. Sarah exchanged a meaningful glance with Olivia, who nodded slightly in acknowledgement. When Barbara Collins finally entered the room, the emotional reunion brought tears to everyone's eyes. A tall, silver-haired woman with the same heart-shaped face as the twins, Barbara gathered both girls into her arms, rocking them gently as they clung to her. "My brave, wonderful girls," she murmured, kissing the tops of their heads. "Grandma's here now. Everything's going to be all right." Over the children's heads, Barbara's eyes met Sarah's, communicating wordless gratitude. Later, when the twins were distracted by the dinner trays delivered to their room, the two women stepped into the hallway for a private conversation. "The police told me what happened," Barbara began, her voice shaking slightly. "How they came to your door in the middle of the night. If you hadn't answered, if you hadn't believed them." "But I did," Sarah said simply. "Anyone would have." Barbara shook her head. "No, they wouldn't. Most people would have called the parents first, or assumed the children were exaggerating, or been too afraid to open their door at that hour. You not only provided immediate safety, but recognized the signs of abuse that others missed." She took a deep breath, composing herself. Jennifer stopped letting me visit 6 months ago, right? After Mark moved in. Our last conversation was an argument. I told her something felt off about him, that the girls seemed different, less spontaneous. She accused me of being jealous that she'd found someone and threatened to cut off my access to the children completely if I didn't support her relationship. Classic isolation tactic, Sarah observed. He was working to cut off all external support. I should have fought harder, gone to authorities then, Barbara said, regret evident in her voice. We all miss signs, Sarah replied, thinking of her own failure to recognize the significance of Jennifer's withdrawal from neighborhood activities. What matters now is helping them heal. The conversation shifted to practical matters. Noah's medical needs, the twins' psychological support, and the logistics of temporary guardianship. Barbara would be taking all 3 children back to Pennsylvania once they received medical clearance, but the legal process would be complex, especially with Jennifer's own status as both victim and potentially negligent parent still being determined. They've asked me to bring the children back for interviews and eventual testimony, Barbara explained, her protective instincts evident in her frown. I understand the necessity, but I worry about the additional trauma. There are protocols for child witnesses now, Sarah assured her. Recorded statements, support personnel, age-appropriate questioning, and I'll be here if they need a familiar face during those times. As they continued discussing the children's needs, Dr. Kaplan approached with updates on Noah's condition. The ear infection was responding to antibiotics, his hydration levels were improving, and with proper nutrition, his weight should normalize within weeks. Physically, he should recover fully, the doctor concluded. Children his age are remarkably resilient. The twins may face more complex psychological recovery since they were old enough to understand and remember what was happening. They protected him, Barbara said softly. Emma told me they would take turns staying awake at night to listen. For Noah crying because they were afraid Mark would hurt him if he got up. The image of these young children developing their own surveillance system to protect their baby brother brought a fresh wave of emotion to Sarah. Children should never have to become parents to their siblings, never have to calculate danger in their own home. Later that evening, as Barbara settled into the reclining chair between the twins' beds for the night, Sarah prepared to finally return home. The adrenaline that had sustained her for nearly 24 hours was fading, leaving bone-deep exhaustion in its wake. Mrs. Johnson, Emma called as Sarah gathered her belongings. Will you come back tomorrow? The simple question held layers of meaning, seeking reassurance that connections wouldn't be abruptly severed, that promises of continued support were genuine. Absolutely, Sarah promised. I'll bring those puzzle books you like, and maybe we can work on them together. As she drove home through the quiet evening streets, Sarah noticed the news van had finally departed from in front of the Sanders house, though the police tape remained. Her neighborhood would never look quite the same to her. The ordinary facades of homes now holding the possibility of hidden suffering behind them. The experience had awakened something dormant in Sarah, a sense of purpose that had faded after her retirement from nursing. These children had knocked on her door in their moment of greatest need, and in answering, she had found herself reconnected to the core values that had driven her professional life. Protection of the vulnerable, advocacy for those without voice, and the unwavering belief that intervention mattered. By the following morning, the case had attracted broader attention. Sarah's phone rang early with a call from Detective Wright. We've identified a third location where Reynolds operated under yet another alias, the detective reported without preamble. Indiana, 2018 to 2020. Same pattern, relationship with a single mother, isolation, abuse of the children. That mother eventually committed suicide, and the children entered foster care. They never disclosed the abuse until now, when we contacted them with photos of Reynolds. He's been moving through the Midwest, targeting vulnerable families, Sarah summarized, the systematic nature of his predation becoming clearer. Exactly. And we've found something else. He's been documenting everything, journals, videos, detailed, records of what he calls behavior modification techniques. It's extensive. The implication was clear. Reynolds hadn't been acting on impulse or losing control. He had been methodically traumatizing children and their mothers, recording the effects and evading consequences through careful manipulation of both his victims and the systems designed to protect them. The children mentioned he would punish them by putting them in the basement or garage when they made noise, Sarah recalled. Was he experimenting with forms of abuse? It appears so, Detective Wright confirmed grimly. The journals contain observations about how different punishments yielded different behavioral results. It's being analyzed by our forensic psychologists now. The calculated nature of the abuse made it somehow more horrifying. Not crimes of passion or loss of control, but deliberate traumatization of children for some twisted purpose. What can I do to help? Sarah asked, her resolve strengthening. Continue supporting the children through their interviews and eventual testimony, Detective Wright replied. Their statements will be crucial in building our case, especially since Reynolds is already working to paint Jennifer as the primary abuser and himself as a concerned stepfather who tried to intervene. After ending the call, Sarah sat in her kitchen, processing the expanding dimensions of the case. What had begun as 3 children appearing on her doorstep had become a multi-state investigation into a pattern of calculated abuse spanning years. The scale of the trauma inflicted on multiple families was difficult to comprehend, yet amid the darkness, there was a thread of hope. Emma and Lily had somehow maintained their moral compass, despite ongoing manipulation. They had recognized the wrongness of what was happening and taken extraordinary action to protect themselves and their brother. Their resilience offered a counterpoint to the calculated cruelty they had endured. When Sarah arrived at the hospital later that morning, she found the pediatric floor bustling with activity. Noah was being prepared for discharge into Barbara's temporary custody, with appointments scheduled for follow-up care in Pennsylvania. The twins had been evaluated by a child psychologist specializing in trauma who had recommended immediate therapy to process their experiences. "Mrs. Johnson," Emma called when she spotted Sarah in the doorway. "Grandma says we're going to her house today. She said you know where it is if you want to visit." Sarah smiled, touched by the child's eagerness to maintain their connection. "I would love to visit you at your grandmother's house, maybe next weekend when you've had some time to settle in." As the discharge process continued, Barbara pulled Sarah aside. "I can't thank you enough for everything you've done. The police told me you stayed with them all night, that you recognized signs of abuse immediately and got them the help they'd needed." "They saved themselves," Sarah replied honestly. "I just answered the door. Sometimes that's all it takes. One person willing to answer when a child knocks." Barbara's eyes filled with tears. The psychologist says they're showing remarkable resilience, largely because they took action themselves and were immediately believed and protected. That moment, when you opened your door and took them seriously, may have saved not just their lives, but their sense of agency. The conversation was interrupted by Olivia's arrival with final paperwork and resources for Barbara, contact information for trauma-specialized therapists near her home, details about victim support services, and the schedule for follow-up interviews with investigators. "We'll need the twins to provide formal statements for the prosecution," Olivia explained, "but we'll do everything possible to minimize additional trauma. They can be interviewed in a child-friendly environment with support." personnel présent. As the discharge preparations concluded, Detective Wright arrived with a development that would significantly impact the case trajectory. Jennifer Sanders regained consciousness an hour ago, she informed them quietly, stepping away from where the children were gathering their belongings. Her first coherent question was about the children's safety. When told they had fled to a neighbor's house, she became extremely agitated, repeating that he'll punish them if they told. She was afraid for them. Barbara interpreted hope, evident in her voice. This suggested her daughter had not been a willing participant in the abuse, but another victim of Reynolds' control. It appears so, Detective Wright confirmed. The preliminary toxicology shows high levels of sedatives consistent with her statement that Reynolds would prepare her anxiety medicine each night, insisting she take it while he watched. She claims he gradually increased the dosage until she spent most evenings and nights in a semi-conscious state, aware of problems but unable to intervene. Drugging her to prevent protection of the children, Sarah summarized, thinking of the twins' comment that their mother wouldn't wake up when Noah cried. Exactly. She's provided consent for a full toxicology panel and medical examination. The DEA will consider her victim status when determining whether she faces charges related to child endangerment. This development added another layer to the already complex case. Jennifer Sanders appeared to be both a victim of Reynolds' manipulation and potentially culpable for failing to protect her children. The legal system would need to carefully weigh these factors in determining accountability. As Barbara prepared to leave with the children, there was a moment of unexpected grace. Jennifer, still hospitalized but conscious, had been allowed a brief video call with her children under supervision. Despite her fragile condition, she had mustered the strength to deliver a message the children desperately needed to hear. "None of this was your fault," she told them, tears streaming down her face. "You did exactly the right thing getting help. I'm so proud of how brave you were, taking care of each other and Noah." The validation from their mother seemed to lift a weight from the twins' shoulders. They had feared her anger or disappointment, another manipulation Reynolds had used to ensure their silence. Instead, they received affirmation of their courage and absolution from responsibility, crucial first steps in their healing process. As final goodbyes were exchanged, Lily surprised everyone by approaching Sarah with a carefully folded piece of hospital stationery. "I made this for you," she said, placing it in Sarah's hand, "so you don't forget us." Sarah unfolded the paper to find a crayon drawing of 5 stick figures, 3 small ones holding hands with 2 larger ones. Above them, in a child's careful printing, were the words, "Thank you for believing us." The simple message encapsulated what had mattered most, not just physical safety or intervention, but the fundamental act of taking children's words seriously, of believing their truth even when it seemed improbable. In a world where adults had betrayed their trust, being believed had become the most precious gift. As Barbara guided the children toward the elevator, both twins turned back for a final wave. Their faces still showed shadows of their ordeal, but there was something else visible now too, the beginning of trust rebuilt, of security regained, of childhood possibly recovered. Sarah carefully refolded the drawing and placed it in her purse. The children might be leaving the hospital, but the case and her involvement in it was far from over. There would be statements to give, testimony to support, and ongoing connections to maintain as these children navigated the complex path of healing. Outside the hospital, reporters had gathered, alerted by police scanner activity and the emerging details of Reynolds' multi-state history of abuse. Sarah noticed how Barbara positioned herself as a physical shield, protecting the children from cameras and questions as they moved toward her car. Detective Wright appeared at Sarah's side. "You've become a key witness in what's evolving into one of the most significant child abuse cases in the county's history, she said quietly. Reynolds' documentation of his methods, combined with his pattern across multiple states, has attracted attention from federal authorities. They're investigating whether this constitutes a form of serial predation that crosses into federal jurisdiction. Will that help protect future children from him? Sarah asked, her focus remaining on the practical outcome rather than legal technicalities. Absolutely. Federal charges carry longer sentences, and a multi-state pattern establishes the premeditated, calculated nature of his actions. No judge will view this as a momentary lapse in judgment or isolated incident. As Barbara's car pulled away from the curb, the twins' faces visible in the back window, Sarah felt the full weight of what had transpired since that knock on her door just over 24 hours ago. Lives irrevocably changed, systems activated, a predator's methodology exposed. Yet amid the legal complexities and ongoing investigation, one simple truth remained central. Two 7-year-old girls had found the extraordinary courage to seek help, trusting that someone would answer their knock. In doing so, they had not only saved themselves and their brother, but potentially countless other children who might have fallen victim to Mark Reynolds' calculated abuse. As Sarah turned to leave, her phone chimed with a text message from Barbara. The girls are asking if you can visit next weekend. Lily wants to show you her art supplies, and Emma says you need to see the tire swing. Let me know what day works for you. Sarah smiled as she typed her reply, the first tendrils of a new, purpose-taking route in her life. Sometimes the most meaningful connections began with the smallest actions. Opening a door in the middle of the night, believing a child's difficult truth, offering help without hesitation. From such simple beginnings, healing could grow. Justice could emerge, and lives could transform in ways no one might have predicted. The courthouse hallway felt cavernous and cold, despite the summer heat outside. Sarah Johnson sat on the polished wooden bench, her back straight and her hands folded neatly in her lap, a posture that belied the anxiety churning inside her. It had been 3 months since that fateful night when the Sanders twins had appeared on her doorstep with their baby brother, and today would mark her first formal testimony in the case against Mark Reynolds. Next to her sat Barbara Collins, the children's grandmother, who had become a steady ally in the complex legal and emotional journey that followed the children's rescue. Barbara's silver hair was pulled back in a neat bun, her expression resolute. As she checked her watch for the 3rd time in 10 minutes. The prosecution said they'd meet us at 9:30, she murmured. I hate keeping the girls waiting. They're already so anxious about this whole process. Sarah nodded in understanding. Emma and Lily were in a separate waiting area with Olivia Martinez, the dedicated social worker who had remained with the case despite her heavy caseload. The twins would not be testifying today. Child trauma specialists and the prosecutor had worked out a protocol to minimize their court appearances, but they had insisted on coming to the courthouse when they learned Sarah would be speaking about what happened that night. They want to be here for you, Barbara had explained when she called Sarah the night before. Emma says it's because you were there for them when they needed someone to believe them. Now, as they waited for the prosecutor, Sarah reflected on the extraordinary developments of the past few months. What had begun as a desperate midnight escape by 3 frightened children had evolved into a multi-jurisdictional investigation, revealing a pattern of calculated predatory behavior spanning several states. Mark Reynolds, they had learned, was actually Marshall Reeves, a man who had systematically targeted vulnerable single mothers and their children in at least 4 states over the past decade. Mrs. Johnson, Mrs. Collins. Both women looked up to see District Attorney Eleanor Patel approaching, her tailored suit and confident stride projecting the composed authority needed to prosecute such a complex case. "Thank you both for being here today," she said, sitting down beside them. "I wanted to review what to expect before we go in. Mrs. Johnson, your testimony is straightforward but crucial. You'll be establishing the children's condition when they arrived at your home, and the immediate disclosures they made. The defense will likely challenge you on whether you led the children with suggestive questioning." Sarah had prepared for this, reviewing her detailed notes from that night. "I asked open-ended questions," she confirmed. "My nursing background taught me how to gather information without leading, especially in potential abuse cases." D.A. Patel nodded approvingly. "That's exactly what makes your testimony so valuable. As a retired nurse with decades of experience observing signs of abuse and neglect, you bring credibility that's difficult to undermine." She turned to Barbara. "Mrs. Collins, I understand the twins are here today. How are they handling everything?" Barbara's expression softened when speaking of her grandchildren. "Better than anyone could expect. The therapy is helping. Noah's developmental delays are resolving. He's actually saying several words now. The twins still have nightmares, but they're talking about them instead of suffering in silence." This progress represented hard-won healing. After moving to Pennsylvania with their grandmother, the children had begun intensive trauma-focused therapy. 3 times a week, they worked with specialists trained in helping young survivors process their experiences in age-appropriate ways. Sarah had visited twice, marveling at the gradual re-emergence of the vibrant personalities that had been suppressed under Mark's reign of terror. "There's something you should know before we go in," D.A. Patel said, her voice dropping. "The defense has filed a motion challenging the children's eventual testimony. They're claiming that Jennifer Sanders' drug use makes her children's accounts unreliable, that they may have been coached to blame Mark for what was actually neglect by their mother." Sarah felt a surge of protective anger. "That's absurd. Those children risked everything to escape that house, their physical condition alone." "I agree completely," D.A. Patel interrupted gently, "and the medical evidence strongly supports their accounts. But you should be prepared for the defense to take this approach. Mark Reynolds has hired Lawrence Barrett, one of the most aggressive defense attorneys in the state." The courthouse doors opened, and Sarah caught a glimpse of Mark Reynolds being led in by court officers. He looked different now. The charming, well-groomed neighbor replaced by a prison-pale defendant in a suit that seemed deliberately chosen to project harmless normalcy. When he spotted Sarah, something flickered behind his eyes. Recognition, calculation, perhaps a flash of the true personality behind the carefully constructed facade. "Don't engage with him," D.A. Patel advised, noting Sarah's reaction. "He's remarkably skilled at manipulation. Several corrections officers have reported feeling sympathetic toward him, despite knowing the charges he's facing." The warning was unnecessary. Sarah had seen behind the mask to the calculated cruelty that had traumatized 3 innocent children. No performance of normalcy could erase the image of the twins standing on her doorstep, shivering and terrified, yet somehow finding the courage to seek help. A court officer approached to inform them that proceedings would begin shortly. As they prepared to enter the courtroom, Barbara's phone chimed with a text message. "It's Olivia," she reported after checking the screen. "The girls are asking if they can see you before you testify." Sarah looked questioningly at D.A. Patel, who nodded. "There's time. It might help them feel more connected to the process, which their therapist says is important for their recovery." They followed a court officer to a private waiting room designed for vulnerable witnesses. The space was intentionally non-threatening, comfortable. Furniture, soft lighting, and a table with coloring supplies. Emma and Lily sat side by side on a small sofa, identical in their neat dresses and braided hair, but distinctly individual in their expressions. Emma, ever the protector, sat slightly forward, her posture alert and watchful. Lily, more introspective, was focused on a drawing, though she looked up immediately when the door opened. "Mrs. Johnson!" Both girls spoke simultaneously, a twin habit that had reasserted itself as they began to heal. They didn't rush to her as they might have before their ordeal. Their therapist had explained that physical boundaries had become important to them as part of reclaiming bodily autonomy. But their faces brightened visibly. "We made you something," Emma announced, gesturing to the table where several papers lay scattered, "to help you be brave in court." Lily selected one drawing and brought it to Sarah. It depicted a simple courthouse with 4 figures standing together outside, clearly the twins, Sarah and Barbara. Above them, written in colorful letters, were the words, "Truth Tellers Club." "Our therapist says telling the truth about scary things makes them less powerful," Emma explained, with the solemnity of a child grappling with concepts beyond her years. "So we're all in the Truth Tellers Club now." Sarah felt her eyes sting, with tears as she accepted the drawing. "This is beautiful. I'll keep it with me when I'm speaking today." "Are you scared?" Lily asked quietly, her perception acute as always. "A little," Sarah admitted, believing in honesty with these children who had experienced too many adult lies. "But being a little scared doesn't stop you from doing important things, does it?" Both girls shook their heads, understanding this truth from their own experience. The moment held a poignant symmetry. 3 months ago, Sarah had provided safety when they were frightened. Today, in their way, they were offering her courage. As the time for testimony approached, Sarah hugged them gently, promising to see them afterward. Returning to the courtroom corridor with Barbara and D.A. Patel, she felt fortified by the encounter. The drawing, carefully folded in her pocket, served as a tangible reminder of why this process mattered despite its difficulties. Inside the courtroom, the formal proceedings created a structured environment for confronting the horrific realities of the case. Judge Amelia Harrington, known for her expertise in complex abuse cases, maintained firm control over the proceedings. When Lawrence Barrett, Reynolds' defense attorney, attempted to challenge the admissibility of certain evidence, the judge demonstrated her thorough understanding of precedent and procedure. "Your Honor," Barrett argued smoothly, "the state is attempting to introduce evidence from investigations in other jurisdictions where my client was never charged with any crime. This is clearly prejudicial and irrelevant to the specific allegations in this case." Judge Harrington fixed him with a steady gaze. "Mr. Barrett, the pattern evidence has been properly submitted under state statute regarding similar acts. The relevance substantially outweighs any prejudicial effect, particularly given the methodical nature of the alleged behavior across multiple households. Your objection is overruled." When Sarah was finally called to testify, she approached the witness stand with composed determination. After being sworn in, she sat with her back straight, hands folded over the children's drawing in her lap, its presence a private talisman. The Patel began methodically establishing Sarah's background and experience. "Mrs. Johnson, could you please tell the court about your professional qualifications?" "I was a registered nurse for 32 years, with 25 of those in emergency medicine and pediatric care. I served as the pediatric nursing supervisor at Riverdale Memorial for 12 years before my retirement 3 years ago." "And in that capacity, did you receive specialized training in recognizing signs of child abuse and neglect?" "Yes, all pediatric staff receive mandatory training in identifying physical, emotional, and sexual abuse indicators. Additionally, I completed advanced certification in forensic nursing, which included specific protocols for documenting and reporting suspected abuse. And as a nurse, were you a mandated reporter of suspected child abuse?" "Yes, I filed approximately 27 formal reports during my career when I observed suspicious injuries or concerning behaviors in children under my care. This foundation established her credibility as someone trained to recognize signs of abuse without overreacting or misinterpreting normal childhood injuries, preemptively addressing likely defense challenges. DA Patel then moved to the events of January 12th. Can you describe for the court what happened at approximately 2:17 a.m. that night? Sarah recounted the story with clinical precision. The knock at her door, the children's condition when she found them, the immediate signs of physical neglect and emotional distress she observed. She described Noah's symptoms of exposure and untreated ear infection, the bruising pattern on Emma's arms, and Lily's selective mutism when adult men approached. Based on your medical training and experience, what conclusions did you draw about their condition? DA Patel asked. I observed multiple indicators consistent with ongoing neglect and potential physical abuse. Noah's diaper rash was severe enough to suggest he had been left in soiled diapers for extended periods. His ear infection had progressed to a point where it would have caused significant pain for days before intervention. The twins showed signs of malnourishment, despite their mother's history of appropriate feeding practices before Mr. Reynolds' arrival in the household. When DA Patel asked about the children's disclosures, Sarah recounted their statements with careful accuracy, referring to her notes to ensure precision. Emma told me, Mark doesn't like noise at night. He says Noah cries too much and Mum just takes her special medicine and sleeps. Lily then added that he put Noah in the cold garage last night. We found him there this morning. Mom said it never happened. Did you ask follow-up questions about these statements? Yes, using open-ended prompts such as, can you tell me more about that? Or what happened next? I was careful not to suggest scenarios or lead them in any direction. As anticipated, the cross-examination was challenging. Lawrence Barrett approached with a calculated blend of skepticism and false sympathy. Mrs. Johnson, you must have been quite startled to find 3 young children at your door in the middle of the night. That would be upsetting for anyone. I was concerned for their welfare, yes. Concerned enough, perhaps, to jump to conclusions, to see abuse where there might simply have been a family under stress. Sarah met his gaze steadily. My assessment was based on objective physical signs and the children's spontaneous disclosures. My training taught me to document factual observations without interpretation. Barrett shifted tactics. You were aware that Jennifer Sanders had a history of depression following her divorce, correct? I knew she had struggled after her husband's departure, yes, but she had been managing well as a single parent until approximately 6 months before this incident. Isn't it possible what you observed was the result of a mother struggling with mental health issues rather than any action by my client? Sarah didn't take the bait. The children specifically attributed certain actions to Mr. Reynolds. Moreover, their physical and emotional conditions showed marked deterioration, coinciding precisely with his arrival in the household, not with their parents' divorce 2 years earlier. For nearly an hour, Barrett attempted to undermine her testimony, suggesting alternative explanations, implying she had influenced the children's statements, even suggesting her age might have affected her observations. Sarah remained composed, referring to her notes when necessary and consistently returning to the factual basis for her concerns. When finally excused from the stand, Sarah felt drained but satisfied. She had spoken truth to power, creating an official record of what she had witnessed. As she returned to her seat beside Barbara, the older woman squeezed her hand in silent support. The remainder of the day brought testimony from the first responding officers and the pediatrician who had examined the children at the hospital. Each professional account added another layer to the emerging picture of calculated abuse and control. By late afternoon, when Judge Harrington called a recess until the following day, The prosecution had established a solid foundation for their case. In the courthouse corridor, Sarah was surprised to find Jennifer Sanders waiting near the exit. The young mother looked dramatically different from the neighbor Sarah had known, thinner, with a fragile sobriety in her eyes, but also a determination that had been absent during her relationship with Reynolds. She approached hesitantly. "Mrs. Johnson, I hope to see you today. I wanted—" She paused, struggling for words. "I need to thank you for answering your door that night, for believing my children when I couldn't protect them." The complex emotions between them, guilt, gratitude, shared trauma, created an awkward moment. Jennifer had spent 8 weeks in a residential treatment program after her hospitalization, addressing both the chemical dependency Reynolds had fostered and the psychological manipulation she had endured. Now, she was living in supervised housing, attending outpatient therapy and working toward reunification with her children through carefully monitored visits. "They saved themselves," Sarah replied gently. "I just provided the safe place they needed." Jennifer shook her head. "You did much more than that. You saw what I couldn't see, what he wouldn't let me see." The therapists explained how he systematically isolated us, how the medication kept me in a fog while he... Her voice broke. "You were a victim too," Sarah said, meaning it. The investigation had revealed how thoroughly Reynolds had manipulated Jennifer, exploiting her previous depression, controlling her medication, gradually separating her from support systems, and using her love for her children as leverage for compliance. "That doesn't excuse my failure as their mother." Jennifer's voice held the raw edge of someone confronting painful truth. "I'm working every day to become worthy of them again. My therapist says it will take time for them to trust me, and that's the consequence I have to accept." Her frankness reflected the difficult personal work she had undertaken. Unlike Reynolds, who continued to deny responsibility and blame others, Jennifer had embraced accountability while recognizing how she too had been victimized. "They ask about you at every visit," she added. "Emma says you're the bravest neighbor in the world." This unexpected connection to the children brought a smile to Sarah's face. "They're extraordinary children. Their resilience amazes me." "The judge is allowing me an additional supervised visit this weekend," Jennifer said. "They mentioned you might be visiting their grandmother's house soon. If you're comfortable with it, maybe you could be there too. It might help them feel safer with me if someone they trust is present." The request revealed both Jennifer's insight into her children's needs and her willingness to accept support from unexpected sources. Before Sarah could respond, Barbara joined them, having overheard the conversation. "That's actually a wonderful idea," she said, surprising both women with her ready agreement. "The therapist has been suggesting we create more normal social interactions for the girls that include their mother, but don't place the full emotional burden on them. Having you there, Sarah, might create a bridge." This development reflected the remarkably functional support system that had formed around the children despite the traumatic circumstances. While the legal process pursued justice, the adults in the children's lives, grandmother, mother, social worker, neighbor, had formed an unconventional alliance focused solely on their recovery and well-being. Later that evening, after returning to her hotel near the courthouse, Sarah called her own daughter to check in. Their relationship had deepened through this experience, with Catherine developing new appreciation for her mother's strength and principles. "How did it go today?" Catherine asked. "Was it awful facing him in court?" "Not awful," Sarah reflected. "Necessary. He tried to stare me down when I testified, but all I could think about was those children and what they endured." "Mom, I've been thinking," Catherine said, her voice turning serious. "Remember how I wondered why you were getting so involved? In this case, putting yourself through all this stress at your age?" Sarah remembered the conversation well. Catherine's initial concern that her retired mother was taking on too much emotional burden with the Sanders children. "I understand it now," Catherine continued. "Tyler's teacher called today about something she noticed. Tyler, Sarah's 7-year-old grandson, was close in age to the twins. Nothing serious," Catherine quickly assured her. "Just that he's been having trouble concentrating, seems withdrawn sometimes. She was checking if anything changed at home recently." "Has something changed?" Sarah asked, immediately concerned. "That's just it. Yes, but I hadn't realized how it was affecting him. Tom's new work schedule means he's gone most evenings, and I've been so focused on the baby and the house renovation that I haven't been as attentive to Tyler. The teacher noticed changes I missed because I'm too close to the situation." The parallel wasn't lost on either of them. Just as Sarah had recognized signs in the Sanders children that their own mother couldn't see through the fog of manipulation and medication, Tyler's teacher had observed subtle changes that Catherine had missed in the daily routine of family life. "Sometimes we need outside eyes," Sarah said gently. "It doesn't mean you're not a good mother." "That's my point, Mom. I finally understand why you couldn't just call the police and step back from these children. Sometimes being the person who notices creates a responsibility that goes beyond the immediate moment." This insight touched Sarah deeply. Her involvement with the Sanders children had never been a choice so much as a moral necessity. Once she opened her door to them, the connection was formed and the obligation accepted. The following morning brought the most challenging testimony, yet Detective Samantha Wright presented evidence from the search of Reynolds' home, including the sophisticated surveillance system he had installed throughout the house. "We recovered approximately 340 hours of video footage from hidden cameras in the children's bedroom, bathroom, and play areas," she testified, her professional demeanor masking the revulsion such violations naturally evoked. The defendant maintained meticulous records correlating specific disciplinary interventions, his term, with observed behavioral changes in the children. The courtroom fell silent as she described journals where Reynolds had documented his methodical breaking down of normal childhood behaviors. He had created what he called controlled stress environments to test the children's reactions, deliberately triggering fear responses, then recording the results with clinical detachment. In one entry dated December 3rd, he writes, "Subject: he showed decreased vocalization after night isolation procedure. Subject L exhibited increased compliance following demonstration with younger subject. Recommend continuing protocol for optimal behavioral modification." The clinical language disguised horrific realities. Night isolation referred to locking the children in dark spaces. Demonstration with younger subject meant threatening or harming Noah to ensure the twins' obedience. Reynolds had approached child abuse with the calculated methodology of a researcher conducting unauthorized human experimentation. When court recessed for lunch, Sarah found herself needing fresh air and solitude to process what she had heard. She walked to a small park near the courthouse, sitting on a bench beneath a maple tree. The normality of the scene, children playing, couples walking, office workers enjoying lunch breaks, created a surreal contrast to the darkness being examined in the courtroom. Her phone rang, Barbara checking to confirm Saturday's visit to Pennsylvania. The twins had been told that morning that Sarah would be coming, and apparently they had immediately begun planning activities to share with her. "Lily wants to show you her new art therapy projects," Barbara reported. "And Emma insists you need to see how high she can swing now. They've made progress, Sarah, real progress." This update provided the emotional counterbalance Sarah needed. After the morning's disturbing testimony, While the court process exposed the methodology of trauma, the children themselves were writing a different story, one of healing, recovery, and reclaimed childhood. After lunch, Jennifer Sanders took the stand. Her testimony would be crucial yet deeply painful, forcing her to confront both her vulnerability to Reynolds' manipulation and her failure to protect her children. Sarah watched as the young mother walked to the witness stand, her steps unsteady but her expression resolved. For nearly 3 hours, Jennifer detailed the gradual evolution of control and isolation. She described how Reynolds had initially presented himself as supportive and understanding of her struggles, as a single mother, offering help with childcare and household management. He said he'd manage my medication for me, that it was one less thing for me to worry about, she testified, her voice strengthening as she spoke. He'd bring me the pills and a glass of water each night, watch me take them. At first it was just my prescribed antidepressant, but then he said the doctor had called in something to help me sleep because I seemed so stressed. She described waking in the mornings, feeling disoriented and groggy, unable to fully respond to her children's needs. I'd hear Noah crying, but couldn't seem to make my body move to help him. Mark would say he'd take care of everything, that I should rest, because I was fragile. He kept telling me I wasn't stable enough to handle the children without him. The medical evidence supported her account. Toxicology tests after her hospitalization had shown not only her prescribed medication, but also benzodiazepines and sleep aids at doses that would render her semi-conscious and compliant. Pharmacy records confirmed these had been filled using her insurance, but signed for by Reynolds. The most devastating part of her testimony came when she described the gradual changes in her children that she had recognized even through her medicated haze. Emma stopped singing. She used to sing all the time, in the bath while coloring, helping with Noah, but after a few months with Mark in the house, she went silent. Lily stopped making eye contact. Noah cried differently, not loud and healthy, but these weak little sounds. Her voice broke. I knew something was wrong, but he convinced me it was all in my head, that my mental health issues were making me paranoid. He'd show me pictures of us all smiling together at the park or having ice cream and say, "Does this look like an unhappy family? You're imagining problems because you're afraid of being happy." The gaslighting techniques were textbook, creating evidence of normalcy through staged happy moments while systematically undermining her perception of reality. Combined with the chemical manipulation of her consciousness, it had created the perfect environment for abuse to flourish undetected. The last thing I clearly remember before the night the children left was Mark bringing me 2 pills instead of 1. He said the doctor had increased my dosage because I seemed especially anxious about the children. After that, everything is fragmented until I woke up in the hospital. Lawrence Barrett's cross-examination was brutal, attempting to portray Jennifer as an irresponsible mother who had willingly taken medication that impaired her parenting. "You filled prescriptions for these medications, did you not?" he challenged. "My name was on them," she acknowledged. "But Mark handled all the medical appointments and pharmacy visits. I signed what he put in front of me." "And you never questioned this arrangement? Never wondered why you felt so disoriented?" Jennifer didn't flinch from the painful truth. "I trusted him. By the time I began to realize something was wrong, I was already too medicated to advocate effectively for myself or my children. That's my greatest regret, and something I will spend the rest of my life trying to make right." By the end of the day's testimony, the courtroom atmosphere had shifted. What had begun as a case about child abuse had expanded to reveal a pattern of calculated psychological torture affecting not just the children, but their mother as well. Reynolds sat impassively at the defense table, occasionally whispering to his attorney, his expression betraying nothing of his thoughts as his methodology was exposed in clinical detail. Outside the courthouse, reporters gathered, the case having attracted national attention as details of Reynolds' systematic abuse across multiple states emerged. Sarah avoided the cameras, slipping out a side entrance where Barbara waited in her car. "The twins called after school," Barbara reported as they drove away. "They wanted to know how the truth-telling went today. I didn't share details, of course, but told them you and their mother both spoke very clearly about what happened." "How did they react to their mother being there?" Sarah asked, curious about their evolving relationship with Jennifer. Emma asked if she did good telling the truth, and Lily wanted to know if she seemed less medicine sleepy. They're processing this in their own way, trying to reconcile the mother they knew before Mark with the one who couldn't protect them during his control. The concept of their mother as simultaneously responsible, yet also victimized, created understandable confusion for the children. Their therapist was helping them navigate these complicated emotions, emphasizing that they could love their mother while still acknowledging she had failed to keep them safe. "The healing isn't linear," Barbara observed as they reached the hotel. "Some days they seem almost back to their old selves, laughing, playing, being normal kids. Other days, a small trigger, a dark closet, a man who resembles Mark. Even certain tones of voice sends them back into hypervigilance or withdrawal." Sarah understood this pattern all too well from her nursing experience with trauma patients. "Recovery isn't about erasing what happened," she said. "It's about building the capacity to carry it without being defined by it." As she prepared for the next day's court proceedings, Sarah reflected on the interconnected journeys unfolding from that single moment when she answered her door to find 3 frightened children seeking sanctuary. Justice was proceeding through the courts. Healing was happening through therapy, safe relationships, and time. And somewhere in between, a community of adults had formed around these children, committed to ensuring that the trauma they had endured would not determine their future. Tomorrow would bring more testimony, more evidence, more confrontation with the calculated cruelty that had been hidden behind the facade of a normal home. But beyond the courthouse, beyond the legal process, 3 children were swinging on a tire swing in Pennsylvania, drawing pictures with bright colors, and gradually reclaiming their right to childhood joy and safety. That reality, more than any legal verdict, represented the true triumph over the darkness they had escaped on a cold January night. Autumn painted the trees of Pennsylvania in brilliant hues of red and gold as Sarah Johnson drove the familiar, a route to Barbara Collins' farmhouse. 1 year had passed since that frigid January night when the Sanders twins had appeared on her doorstep with their baby brother, and today marked a milestone none of them had been certain would arrive: the final sentencing of Mark Reynolds, now confirmed by authorities to be a predator who had operated under multiple identities across 5 states. Sarah's car hummed along the winding country roads, the radio providing soft background music as she reflected on the extraordinary journey of the past 12 months. The trial had concluded 3 months earlier with a conviction on all counts: child endangerment, illegal surveillance of minors, assault, coercion, identity fraud, and a host of other charges that had accumulated as investigators uncovered the full scope of Reynolds' activities. Today's sentencing would write the legal conclusion to a story that had irrevocably changed many lives, not least the 3 children who had found the courage to escape their tormentor. Since moving to their grandmother's home, Emma, Lily, and Noah had gradually reclaimed the childhood that Reynolds had attempted to steal. Sarah had watched their transformation during her regular visits, marveling at their resilience and capacity for joy, despite the trauma they had endured. As she turned onto the gravel driveway leading to Barbara's farmhouse, Sarah spotted the twins immediately. They were in the front yard, helping their grandmother rake leaves into enormous piles, their cheeks flushed with exertion and excitement. Even from a distance, Sarah could see how much they had changed. Taller, healthier, more animated in their movements. Emma noticed the car first, dropping her rake and nudging her sister. "Mrs. Johnson's here." Their voices carried across the yard as Sarah parked and stepped out of her car. They approached with the controlled enthusiasm that had replaced their initial caution around physical affection. No longer flinching at unexpected movements or maintaining vigilant awareness of all adults in their space, they had developed a new confidence that was beautiful to witness. "We made a welcome sign, but the wind blew it away," Emma explained, pointing to a colorful piece of paper trapped against the fence line. "Noah helped," Lily added proudly. "He colored the bottom part." The mention of the youngest Sanders child brought Sarah's attention to the front porch, where Barbara stood with Noah balanced on her hip. At 2.5, he was barely recognizable as the malnourished, listless baby who had been carried to Sarah's door that winter night. Now, he was sturdy and vocal, his vocabulary expanding daily and his developmental delays largely resolved through intensive intervention. "Perfect timing," Barbara called in greeting. "The apple cider is just ready, and someone is very excited to show you his new words." As Sarah climbed the porch steps, Noah reached for her with confidence. "Sawa!" he proclaimed, his pronunciation improving but still charmingly imperfect. "Look, trucks!" He pointed to his shirt, which featured a parade of construction vehicles, the latest obsession in his rapidly developing world of interests. The normality of this interaction, a toddler proudly sharing his enthusiasm, struck Sarah as perhaps the most profound measure of the children's healing. Noah had no conscious memory of the abuse he had endured, and through the dedicated work of his therapists, family, and support network, his early trauma had not defined his development. Inside the warmth of Barbara's kitchen, the atmosphere was one of contained anticipation. Today's sentencing would not require the children's presence in court, a mercy for which everyone was grateful. But its significance hung in the air nonetheless. District Attorney Eleanor Patel would call afterward with the results, bringing formal closure to the legal process that had dominated their lives for months. "Jennifer should be here around noon," Barbara mentioned as she poured apple cider into mugs decorated with fall leaves, a craft project the twins had completed at school. "Her counselor is driving her. They thought it would be good for her to be with the children when the news comes, rather than sitting alone at the courthouse." Jennifer Sanders' journey had been complex and challenging. After 8 weeks in residential treatment, followed by intensive outpatient therapy, she had gradually rebuilt her relationship with her children through supervised visits that eventually expanded to overnight stays. 4 months ago, she had moved from Riverdale to a small apartment 10 minutes from Barbara's farmhouse, working part-time at a local bookstore while continuing therapy 3 times weekly. The court had established a phased reunification plan, with custody transitioning gradually from Barbara to Jennifer as she demonstrated sustained stability and parenting capacity. The arrangement had evolved into something neither woman had initially expected: a collaborative approach to raising the children, with Barbara providing continuity and support, while Jennifer rebuilt her confidence and bond with her children. "How is she handling today?" Sarah asked quietly, aware of the twins in the adjoining room where they were showing Noah how to build a tower with wooden blocks. Barbara's expression reflected the complicated emotions the situation evoked. "Better than expected. Her therapist says confronting the reality of what happened is part of her recovery. No more medication fog, no more denial. It's painful, but necessary." The relationship between Barbara and her daughter had transformed. As well, initial tension and blame giving way to a shared commitment to the children's well-being. Barbara had come to understand the sophisticated manipulation that had rendered Jennifer vulnerable to Reynolds's control, while Jennifer had accepted responsibility for her failure to protect her children despite those circumstances. "The girls have been asking questions all morning," Barbara continued, lowering her voice further. "Not about the sentencing specifically, but about whether the bad man can ever come back. Their therapist prepared us for this. Anniversary. Dates of trauma often trigger anxiety, even when children are otherwise doing well." Sarah nodded in understanding. "That's why I brought these." She reached into her bag and pulled out 3 small stones, polished smooth and painted with simple symbols, a star, a heart, and a sun. "They're worry stones. My grandmother gave me one when I was about their age and afraid of thunderstorms. You hold it when you're scared, and it reminds you that you're safe now." Barbara smiled appreciatively. "That's perfect. Tangible reminders of safety are exactly what Dr. Morrison suggested." The sound of tires on gravel announced another arrival. Jennifer's counselor's car pulling up outside. The twins' reaction to their mother's arrival spoke volumes about their journey toward healing. There was no fear, no withdrawal, just the normal excitement of children greeting a beloved parent they had not seen for a few days. Jennifer entered the house with the careful confidence of someone who had fought hard to reclaim her life. At 34, she appeared younger than during the dark days of Reynolds' control, her movements more assured, her smile reaching her eyes in a way it hadn't for months during his presence in their lives. "Mom!" Emma was the first to reach her, wrapping her arms around Jennifer's waist. "We made leaf piles taller than Noah, and we saved the biggest one for you to jump in," Lily added, taking her mother's hand. The easy affection between them represented thousands of hours of therapy, careful rebuilding of trust, and Jennifer's unwavering commitment to her recovery. Unlike Reynolds, who had never acknowledged his actions as harmful, Jennifer had confronted her failures directly, working through both her own victimization and her responsibility to her children with painful honesty. She greeted Sarah with a warm hug. Their relationship had evolved from cautious collaboration to genuine friendship, united by their shared commitment to the children's well-being. "Thank you for being here today," Jennifer said quietly. "It means so much to all of us." The hours before the expected call passed in a carefully orchestrated normalcy. Lunch at the big kitchen table, stories in the living room, a walk to see the neighbor's new foal in the pasture behind the property. The adults maintained casual conversation while remaining attuned to the children's emotional states, ready to provide reassurance if anxiety surfaced. It was during their walk back from the pasture that D.A. Patel's call came through. Barbara entered, stepping slightly away from the group, her expression serious as she listened. The twins, perception heightened by their experiences, noticed immediately. "Is that about the bad man?" Emma asked, moving closer to her mother. Lily reached for Sarah's hand, a gesture that had become their silent way of seeking reassurance. Jennifer knelt to her daughter's level, demonstrating the direct communication skills she had developed in therapy. "Yes, that's Ms. Patel calling to tell us what happened at court today. Remember how we talked about the judge deciding how long Mark needs to stay away from everyone?" Both girls nodded solemnly. Their therapist had helped them understand the sentencing process in age-appropriate terms, emphasizing the aspects that related directly to their safety rather than punitive justice. Barbara returned to the group, her face reflecting a complex mixture of relief and gravity. 28 years, she said simply. No possibility of parole for at least 23. The judge cited the calculated nature of the abuse and the evidence of similar behavior in multiple states as aggravating factors. The news landed differently with each person. Sarah felt a wave of vindication. The system, sometimes frustratingly slow and bureaucratic, had ultimately delivered justice. Jennifer pressed her hands to her mouth, tears filling her eyes as the finality of it registered. Barbara's posture relaxed visibly, a tension she had carried for months finally releasing. The twins, watching the adults' reactions carefully, seemed to absorb the emotional current without fully understanding its legal implications. "Does that mean he can never hurt any kids again?" Lily asked, her question cutting to the heart of what mattered most to them. "Yes," Jennifer answered firmly. "He will be in a place where he cannot reach any children for a very, very long time." Emma's brow furrowed in concentration. "Until we're grown up? Like, really grown up with our own houses and everything?" "Even longer than that," Sarah confirmed gently. "Until you're older than your mom is now." This concrete timeline seemed to satisfy them, translating the abstract concept of a prison sentence into terms they could comprehend. Noah, oblivious to the significance of the moment, had discovered a particularly fascinating rock and was attempting to add it to his pocket collection. As they continued their walk back to the house, Sarah noticed a subtle shift in the atmosphere, a collective exhale, a burden lifted. The sentencing wouldn't erase what had happened, but it provided a measure of closure and security that had been elusive despite the conviction. Back at the farmhouse, while the children played in the yard under Barbara's watchful eye, Sarah and Jennifer sat on the porch swing, mugs of fresh cider warming their hands against the autumn chill. "I used to imagine this moment," Jennifer confessed quietly, "during those awful months when I was too drugged to protect them, but still aware enough to know something was terribly wrong. I'd fantasize about him being caught, being punished, but now that it's happened..." "It doesn't fix everything," Sarah finished for her, understanding the complexity of Jennifer's emotions. "Exactly. I'm profoundly grateful he can't harm anyone else, but it doesn't erase my children's nightmares or my guilt for bringing him into their lives." Sarah considered this thoughtfully. Maybe closure isn't about erasing what happened, but about creating space for what comes next. "Your children aren't defined by what he did to them. Look at them now." They both turned their gaze to the yard, where Emma was demonstrating her increasingly impressive cartwheel technique, while Lily created a leaf crown for Noah, who sat in the grass giggling as the leaves tickled his face. "They've reclaimed joy," Sarah continued. "That's the real victory here, not just the prison sentence." Jennifer nodded, wiping away a tear. "Their therapist says something similar, that healing isn't about forgetting trauma, but integrating it into a life that's defined by much more than that experience." Their conversation was interrupted by Emma calling from the yard, "Mom, Mrs. Johnson, come look at our leaf house." The children had created an elaborate structure of piled leaves, with walls and a roof, and what appeared to be furniture made of sticks and stones. It was the kind of imaginative play that had been notably absent during Reynolds' control of the household, spontaneous, joyful, free from fear of criticism or punishment. As Sarah and Jennifer joined the children in their leaf house, accepting twigs carefully presented as teacups and engaging in a pretend feast, Sarah reflected on the extraordinary journey from that desperate midnight knock to this moment of ordinary childhood pleasure. The adults had arranged themselves on the ground, laughing as Noah distributed imaginary cookies with great seriousness, when Emma suddenly grew quiet, her expression thoughtful. "Mrs. Johnson," she said, with the directness that characterized her personality, "are you happy you opened your door that night?" The question carried more weight than the 7-year-old likely intended. Sarah considered how to respond honestly while honoring the child's need for reassurance. "Opening my door that night was one of the most important things I've ever done in my whole life," she replied simply. "I'm not happy about why you needed to knock, but I'm very, very happy that you knew you could, and that I was there to answer." This seemed to satisfy Emma, who nodded seriously before returning to the game. But Lily, always more reflective than her twin, persisted with the thread of conversation. "What if you hadn't been home? Or what if you didn't answer?" It was the question Sarah herself had contemplated many times over the past year, the chance alignment of circumstances that had placed her at home that night, awake enough to hear the faint knocking, concerned enough to open her door despite the late hour. "There are always people who will help when children need them," Sarah assured her, choosing her words carefully. "If I hadn't been there, you would have found someone else, another neighbor, a teacher, a police officer. The important thing is that you were brave enough to ask for help." Jennifer added her own perspective, her voice steady despite the emotion evident in her eyes. "And you never have to be that brave again, because now you have so many adults making sure you're safe. Grandma, me, Mrs. Johnson, your teachers, your therapist. None of us will let anything like that happen ever again." The simple reassurance seemed to anchor Lily, who smiled and returned to arranging leaves around the doorway of their structure. The moment highlighted a crucial element of the children's recovery, their growing trust that the adults in their lives would protect them consistently and communicate with them honestly. The remainder of the afternoon passed in a gentle rhythm of play, conversation, and preparation for the small celebration dinner Barbara had planned. The sentencing, while significant, was not being marked with elaborate ceremony. Instead, the focus remained on reinforcing the children's sense of security and normalcy. As Sarah helped Barbara in the kitchen, the older woman shared updates on the children's progress that went beyond what was visible in a day's visit. Emma's teacher says she's emerging as a natural leader in her class, organizing games at recess, standing up for younger children. All that protective energy she developed in crisis is finding positive outlets. "And Lily?" Sarah inquired, knowing the quieter twin sometimes received less attention for her accomplishments. "Flourishing in her own way," Barbara replied with evident pride. Her art therapy has evolved into a genuine talent. Her therapist says she's processing her experiences through creativity rather than shutting down. She's writing stories now too, adventure tales about brave children who overcome obstacles. Noah's progress had been perhaps the most remarkable, given the developmental delays that had concerned medical professionals during his initial examination. "The speech therapist is amazed," Barbara continued. "He's almost caught up to standard. Milestones, and his pediatrician thinks he'll show no lasting effects from the early neglect." This concrete evidence of the children's recovery reinforced what Sarah had observed throughout her visits. They carried their experiences, as all humans carry their histories, but those experiences were not limiting their capacity for growth, connection, or joy. During dinner, Jennifer shared her own news. She'd been accepted into a paralegal training program that would begin in January. "It's part-time, so it won't interfere with our custody schedule," she explained. "And eventually, I'd like to work with family advocacy organizations, helping other mothers navigate the systems I had to learn about during all of this." The announcement represented another step in Jennifer's reclamation of her life and identity. From a woman rendered passive by medication and manipulation, she had emerged as an active participant in her recovery and an increasingly confident mother. The journey had not been linear or simple. There had been setbacks, difficult therapy sessions, painful confrontations with her own vulnerabilities, but her commitment had never wavered. "That's wonderful, Jen," Barbara said warmly. "The program director called me for a reference. I told her you're one of the most determined people I know." This easy support between mother and daughter reflected their healed relationship. Where once there had been blame and distance, there was now mutual respect and a shared dedication to the children's well-being. The family system had reconfigured itself in a way that provided multiple layers of support rather than the isolated, controlled environment Reynolds had created. After dinner, as the early autumn evening brought a chill to the air, they gathered in the living room where a small fire crackled in the fireplace. The setting created a perfect opportunity for Sarah to present the worry stones she had brought. "I have something for each of you," she said, inviting the children to join her on the sofa. "These are special stones that help people feel brave when they're worried or scared." She presented them individually, explaining the significance of each symbol. "Emma, yours has a star because you've always helped guide your brother and sister like stars guide travelers." Emma accepted the stone reverently, running her finger over the painted star with a small, pleased smile. "Lily, yours has a heart because you notice how people feel and care so deeply about everyone around you." Lily clutched her stone immediately, holding it against her chest, as if to connect it directly to her own heart. "And Noah, yours has a sun, because you bring brightness and joy everywhere you go." Though too young to fully understand the sentiment, Noah seemed delighted with his gift, immediately showing it to his mother and grandmother with excited babbling. "When you hold these stones," Sarah explained, "they can remind you that you're safe now, and that you have people who love you and will always protect you. Sometimes our minds remember scary things, even when the danger is gone. These stones can help remind your mind that everything is different now." The simple ritual seemed to resonate with the children, creating a tangible connection to the concept of safety that their therapist had been reinforcing. Jennifer watched with evident gratitude, recognizing the value of such concrete reassurance for children who had experienced profound betrayal of trust. As the evening progressed toward the children's bedtime, Sarah found herself once again struck by the ordinary beauty of their new family rhythm. Barbara supervised teeth brushing while Jennifer prepared to read bedtime stories, the adults moving around each other with the comfortable familiarity of a shared purpose. There were no power struggles, no atmosphere of tension or control, just the collaborative care of three children who had endured extraordinary circumstances. Before leaving, Sarah spent a few quiet moments with each child. Noah was already drowsy in his crib, his worry stone placed safely on the bookshelf nearby, where he could see it but not access it unsupervised. He offered a sleepy night-night sawa before his eyes drifted closed. Lily, always the more reflective twin, had a question as Sarah tucked her in. "Do you think the bad man knows he did bad things? My therapist says sometimes people who hurt others don't understand that what they did was wrong." The question revealed the sophisticated emotional processing occurring beneath Lily's quiet exterior. Sarah chose her response carefully, balancing honesty with age-appropriate simplicity. "Some people who hurt others don't understand or don't want to admit they did something wrong," she acknowledged. "But what matters most is that lots of grown-ups did understand, and they made sure he couldn't hurt you or anyone else again." This seemed to satisfy Lily, who nodded thoughtfully before adding, "I'm glad you understood, and Mom, and Grandma, and the police ladies." "Me too," Sarah agreed, gently smoothing Lily's hair. "That's why it's so important to keep telling trusted grown-ups when something feels wrong or scary." Emma, in the adjacent bed, had been listening to this exchange. "Our teacher says we're the bravest kids in our class because we saved Noah," she contributed, her tone suggesting both pride and lingering processing of their experience. "But we were really scared that night." "Being brave doesn't mean not feeling scared," Sarah reminded her. "It means doing what's right even when you are scared, and you three were incredibly brave." As Sarah prepared to leave the farmhouse, later that evening, the adults gathered on the porch for a final conversation away from the children's ears. The sentencing had prompted reflection on the journey they had shared since that January night. "I keep thinking about how differently things could have gone," Jennifer admitted, her arms wrapped around herself against the evening chill. "If you hadn't answered your door, Sarah, if the children had been too afraid to leave the house, if Mark had woken up and caught them." "But none of those things happened," Barbara interjected gently. "They found the courage, Sarah, was there, and now Reynolds will spend decades in prison. Today is about the path that did unfold, not the one that might have. Sarah nodded in agreement. I think about that night often, but not with fear anymore. I think about the extraordinary courage it took for two 7-year-old girls to take their baby brother and venture out into the cold, trusting that someone would help them. There's such hope in that even after everything they experienced, they still believed help was possible. Jennifer wiped away a tear. Their therapist says that's part of what saved them psychologically. They took action. They weren't just passive victims. They became the heroes of their own story. It doesn't erase the trauma, but it changes how they integrate it. This perspective resonated deeply with Sarah. Throughout her nursing career, she had observed how differently people processed similar traumas, some finding meaning and growth even in terrible circumstances, others remaining trapped in patterns of victimization. The Sanders children, despite their youth, had demonstrated remarkable resilience in their response to adversity. As Sarah prepared to drive home, Jennifer walked her to her car. "I've never properly thanked you," she said suddenly. "Not just for that night, but for everything since. The court testimony, the regular visits, the way you've helped the children maintain a sense of continuity through all the changes." "You don't need to thank me," Sarah assured her. "Watching your family heal has been its own reward. You've done the hard work, all of you." Jennifer shook her head. The therapist talks about turning points, moments that change the direction of a life. For us, it was the moment you opened your door. The children could have knocked elsewhere and been turned away, or been met with fear, or been immediately sent back to what looked like a normal home from the outside. Instead, they found someone who truly saw them. The simple truth of this observation stayed with Sarah during her drive home. In opening her door to 3 frightened children, she had indeed altered the trajectory of multiple lives, including her own. The past year had given her a renewed sense of purpose and connection, a reminder of the profound impact of seemingly small actions. At home, Sarah found a message on her answering machine from Detective Samantha Wright, who had led the investigation into Reynolds's activities. "Just wanted to let you know the sentencing went through as we hoped. 28 years. But the bigger news is that based on evidence from his journals, we've identified 2 other families in similar situations in Wisconsin and Minnesota. We're coordinating with authorities there to make contact and offer support services. This case has opened doors to help others who might still be trapped in situations like what the Sanders family endured. None of this would have happened if you hadn't answered that knock on your door. Thought you should know the ripple effects of that night are still expanding." This update added another dimension to the day's sense of closure. Beyond securing justice for Emma, Lily, and Noah, their courage and Sarah's response to it had potentially created pathways to safety for other children still living under Reynolds' malevolent influence through his various identities and properties. As Sarah prepared for bed that night, she found herself reflecting on the extraordinary chain of events that had begun with the faintest of knocks on her door 1 year ago. The legal case had reached its conclusion, but the story of healing and recovery would continue to unfold in countless ways. Through Emma's emerging leadership, Lily's creative processing, Noah's developmental leaps, Jennifer's reclamation of her agency, and Barbara's steadfast support of them all. The worrystones she had given the children seemed an apt metaphor for their journey. Smooth surfaces emerging from rough beginnings, unique patterns revealed through careful attention, ordinary objects transformed into sources of comfort and strength. Like those stones, the Sanders family had been shaped by difficult pressures but had emerged intact, their essential nature not destroyed but rather revealed through the process. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, ongoing therapy sessions, adjustments to the custody arrangement, normal childhood milestones mixed with occasional trauma responses. But the foundation had been laid for a future defined by security, honest communication, and the unwavering commitment of multiple adults to these children's well-being. As sleep approached, Sarah found herself filled with profound gratitude, not just for the legal resolution achieved today, but for the privilege of witnessing the resilience of the human spirit embodied in 3 young children who had refused to accept the darkness that threatened to engulf them. In reaching out across the cold night to knock on a neighbor's door, they had demonstrated a truth both simple and powerful. Even in our most vulnerable moments, the courage to seek help can transform what seems like an ending into an unexpected beginning. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out.